Okay, even with the conclusive Stanford studies, it's still really rare for most medical doctors to test for adrenal imbalances or deficiencies. Often they're given drugs for anxiety or depression without any lab testing. So that masks, but it doesn't cure the problem. And so here's just a little diagram up here. We have the hypothalamus, which is in the center of your brain, which is sending a message to your pituitary gland, which is sending a message to your adrenal glands. And then you see these red lines, that's called a negative feedback loop. Well, once someone has been stressed for a very long period of time, those loops become inappropriate and imbalanced, and the brain stops getting the correct messages. So when it's time for the body to slow down and relax, the brain is not getting the right message, and it keeps pumping hormones to the adrenal cortex to keep you stressed. So this is one of the major things, is we really need to reverse those feedback loops. Now, there are tons of lab tests that can indicate the severity of the problem. There's some that are very specific. An adrenal stress index, for example, which is a saliva test, but there are blood tests that are as low as $14 that can give you a very, very good clue about whether you've got adrenal imbalance. So it's not expensive. But beyond that, there are tests that can be done in the office. In fact, with our new patients, everyone gets at least one of these tests, and over time we'll retest to see how people are doing. One of those is called an adrenal function test. It's actually, the name was a Ragland's test. It was created by a Dr. Ragland in the 1920s, and I just found his paper a couple months ago, and it's fascinating because they didn't have computers, right? So it's typewritten with all the typos marked out and then new spelling. So it's really fun to see his original paper. And he showed that the ability to maintain blood pressure when you change positions is a function of the adrenal glands. And there are two major mechanisms by which that works. One is called the aldosterone system, which you don't need to know, but aldosterone controls your sodium to potassium balance. So if your sodium is too low, for example, then you don't hold enough fluid in the blood, because the sodium and fluid balance needs to maintain a fairly narrow range. But if you don't have enough sodium, then you don't pull blood into your bloodstream. You have too little blood volume, and when you stand up, rather than increasing your blood pressure by 10 points, which should happen when you go from lying down to standing up, we'll see it drop significantly. If it's 10 points, that's something we need to look at, but I'll see a lot of patients at 20, and my chronic fatigue patients will drop 30 to 40 points. So literally, the reason they feel lightheaded when they stand up is the blood is literally falling out of their brain. So of course they feel lightheaded. And so this we do in the office. It's a very simple test. I think it should be done at every initial intake through all forms of medicine. It's typically only done in your doctor's office if you come in complaining of orthostatic hypotension, or when you stand up, you feel like you're going to pass out and you get dizzy, and then they may test it. Legally, the definition of orthostatic hypotension is a drop of 20 points, but you'll see symptoms much sooner than that. A second test that can be done is paradoxical pupillary response. Again, these are pretty inexpensive tests. Now, we all know that when you shine a light into your eye, that the pupil constricts, right? Well, what most people don't realize is that that constriction should hold for 30 continuous seconds. It should maintain that tightness. If it doesn't stay closed, that indicates weak adrenal glands or post-concussion syndrome in some cases. And post-concussion, I will always do this test. And so typically with my adrenal patients, they're holding that pupil closed for 4 to 7 seconds. That's how dramatic that is. So if that's happening, you can imagine how dysfunctional and disoriented the entire neurological system is at that point.